Idaho's most respected, influential public policy voices.
Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. It's good to be with you. It's been a minute since I've done a live stream, and so I'm looking forward to just sharing random thoughts about stuff going on in Idaho's public policy realm. And if people pop in here and want to ask questions, they're welcome to do that. And if no one shows up, that's fine too, because I'll just spend the whole time rambling because I'm really good at that. Been on the road quite a bit so far this summer. I kind of remember when summers were really quiet. You know, you'd have your legislative session from January to about March or April, and then things would kind of die down right after that, and you spend the summertime working on some research projects and just kind of kicking the tires of state government. But now it's like the stuff never ends. The tomfoolery, shall we say, in government. It's never a dull moment. I mean, I think the best example I give of that is the University of Idaho deciding to buy the University of Phoenix. And, we weren't expecting that. And so we have to go and kind of recalibrate and talk about, how we're going to look into that deal and hold folks accountable for whatever it is that they're considering doing. And just kind of throws your game off just a little bit because it's something that you weren't anticipating. So anyway, I see that on YouTube this thing says that I'm not starting the stream until 6:30, but I think I'd said 6 o'clock, so I don't know if I messed it up somewhere, which is fine. The folks that get in late can be mad at me because I said 6:30 somewhere and maybe I said 6 somewhere else. So sorry about that. Sue me. At any rate, if you have a question, drop it in the chat, and I'm happy to answer. If you have I am live on YouTube. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. It says notify me on the thing, but I see what it is. It has the stream is live, but the notification is still there. Okay, whatever. Technology, it is not my friend. I'm doing the best I can, but bear with me. So anyway, yeah, the University of Idaho thing was kind of a thing that threw off our game just a little bit. But yeah, it says 6:30 on. Let me just see if I can change that real fast. See if that helps it a little bit. Yeah, I must have I must have made a mistake in when I put the thing in. Anyway, no big deal. We're just going to go do this, and then people can come join us later if they like. And like I said, feel free to ask any questions if you have any. But I just wanted to share just a couple thoughts about where we are as an organization and as a movement. As people try to find their way in the conservative movement and um, wonder exactly where we're going. And I'll tell you this much: it is a lot different than it was when we started 15 years ago. 15 years ago, as an organization, it was really about finding little ways to get government out of our lives. Just little things like fixing tax policy or getting rid of a regulation or um, maybe eliminating some kind of program, lowering some budget. I mean, that's kind of the direction that we started. And it's changed quite a bit since then. And just kind of give you a flavor for that. One of the very first projects that the Freedom Foundation worked on as sort of its larger projects was called the Pork Report. And we worked on that in 2009 and then released the report, I think, at the end of 2009, right before the 2010 legislative session. And essentially, what we were putting in there was some 60 pages of government waste that we found mainly at the state level. And it was kind of a fun report. And what was kind of interesting about that back then is that people said, "Oh, Wayne, this is Idaho. You're never going to find a bunch of waste in Idaho government." And we did. And we were working on that with the, what was it called? Boy, what's the name of that group? Citizens Against Government Waste in Washington, D.C. And the guy that was there at the time said, typically we do a pork report in a state, partner with a think tank in the state, and that report will generate, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 pages worth of material. And so when we put together the Idaho report in a state where everybody said you're never going to find waste, we did about 65 pages of waste. And it was interesting, not only that we were able to find that much, that people thought we wouldn't find that much, but also just how indifferent lawmakers were to it. There were a couple things that were immediately addressed from our report, and it took several years for the other things that were in the report to get addressed. Um, for example, the internet here in the office is just terrible sometimes. So just hit me up in the chat if it looks like there's a problem with the stream. But um, the Idaho legislature had put in place a program in the 1970s that basically said that you could give money to a political party of your choice, and it wouldn't affect your tax liability or reduce your refund. And it would actually say in the instructions for the filling out your taxes, and you'll find the same instructions, by the way, in the federal tax uh, documents, because they still have that program in place. The way it works is that you designate a dollar, or in the case of the federal government, $3 to go to the political party of your choice, and it doesn't reduce your tax refund or increase your tax liability, because basically what you're doing is you're designating a dollar or $3 from the general fund and sending that, instead of going to public schools or to the state police or any of those other programs, it instead goes into uh, the coffers of the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or the Libertarian Party or whatever. And to us, that was just crazy that the very first dollar from the stream of revenue going into the state government was the political parties. They would get paid first before everybody else. And that was a great victory. And there were others along the way. We got rid of the pension payoff, as we used to call it, where politicians got a pension boost for working as a legislator part time, and then they go work in state government and they get, as if they've been working for state government for 30 years or whatever through their part time job. They get a tremendous boost in their pension. We got rid of that thing. And there are a lot of other things along the way. I could too many to name, but all this to say that our feeling about what's happening in the world today has changed sharply, which is to say that we think that there's a mental health crisis going on in America that is being subsidized by taxpayers. We believe the education system is not only bad, it is horrendously bad. It is so bad that kids today graduating from public schools, not just in Idaho, but across America, even the high performing students, are not nearly adequately prepared with reading, writing, math, and history as they need to be. And so we've been talking very differently about the public policy matters that are facing the state than what we used to do. We're talking about how really what you're looking at is society altering problems. You're looking at a society on the verge of collapse because of the mental health problems that are being subsidized by government, the education problems that are being subsidized by government, the demise of family, the loss of belief in any kind of faith, which is very important, the destruction of churches, charities, and communities. brought about by government. There was a story about a week ago, pardon me, and since no one's on here to get on to ask questions, I'm just going to pause to take a drink and take my time a little bit. There was a story about a week ago that ran in the newspapers, I think all over the state, and was on TV and radio, and it was talking about how the government officials were celebrating I don't know if celebrating is the right word, but they were marking the 1 year anniversary of the what is it, the 988, I think is the number they use for the suicide hotline. Who knows? I mean, they have all these numbers. They had 901, and then they added 211, and they have 988. I mean, all these different numbers, and they all think they're just brilliant, these politicians, because they added some new thing that people can call just three numbers, but they forget that it just makes things a little bit awkward that you have all these different numbers that you're supposed to keep track of and what they're for. There's 811, which is the dig line. I mean, come on, guys. Anyway, they were marking the 1 year anniversary of the suicide prevention hotline. And to kind of take you back a little bit and how this was administered, the suicide prevention hotlines used to be run by local mental health professionals. And they raised all the money and they ran the hotline and they made sure it was staffed. And so when you called up and you said you're calling from Emmett, they could say, "Oh yeah, I know where that is. That's just down the road from me." And now they've got it set up where it's staffed in state, but then if when it's not staffed, it kicks you up to some national headquarters somewhere. So it's not nearly as personal. It's not run by people who have raised money for it and have put their time and energy and really their resources and love into the creation of the program, and then went back to donors every year and said, hey, here's how this is working, please consider giving us more money. It's run by the government because the government took over the program a few years ago, and of course what's happened since then, the system isn't working better, the number of suicides hasn't gone down, the number of people with mental health problems hasn't diminished, and that's where we are. And this is very typical of government. We were looking at the data for uh, the Medicaid program, which, as you recall, in 2018 was expanded to include able-bodied childless adults. And everybody screamed and they said, we've got to have this program because people need these things to help folks out, medications and surgeries and doctor's appointments and mental health treatments and all this kind of stuff. And when you look at what's happened, is now, I think the number was, I'll have to go back and check, but it's something on the order of 60% of the psychotropic drugs that are being um, prescribed in Idaho come through the Medicaid system. And it's a lot of money, man. We were looking at the data. I don't have them off the top of my head, but just last week we were looking at some of the numbers, and ADHD medicine. Uh, Thousands upon thousands of Idahoans are on ADHD medications, and we pay for it, and it's expensive. Antidepressant, anti-anxiety, and what you have to remember is that that's not how society functioned. It's not as if um, human beings, by their nature, are naturally prone to ADHD and depression and anxiety. It's that we set a system up that causes them to get there. And as a result, you have more and more people who are dependent on medications from, prescribed by the government, funded by taxpayers. And in a lot of cases, I hate to say it, but the answer really is as simple as diet and exercise and sunlight and um, stop staring at these dang things all the time. I was just on vacation for about 10 days in upstate New York, and part of my vacation was there's actually, if you look on the side of this thing, I don't know if you can see it on here, but there's this off button. And you know what? It works. So I had my phone turned off for most of the 10 days that I was gone. It was off for about 8 days. Then I turned it on at the eighth day, and then I kind of checked a few things. I had to uh, book a hotel room for my night the night before I was headed back, so I needed to do that, and I did that. Didn't check the emails, didn't check the text messages, just left all that stuff alone. But I did turn my phone on briefly to see if I could get a hotel room, and I did. But boy, the pool, even after about 8 days, to go and turn your phone on and read emails and check text messages and see what's going on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, it looms very, very large. And what we've been doing is we've been giving these to our kids and grandkids in my case at younger and younger ages, and so they're addicted. I mean, go look around and just pay attention to, when you're not staring at your own phone, pay attention to what's going on in society, in the places around you, when you're at a restaurant, or you go to a movie theater, or you um, go to a grocery store, and go to a park. A beautiful sunny day. I remember going to being in New York City. I'm not in New York that much. It just so happens that two of the stories that I have to tell tonight are about being in New York. But I was in New York City. Remember when the Pokemon craze was really big, the Pokemon Go craze, and everyone was downloading the app, and it was augmented reality. And I guess people still do that a little bit, but it was brand spanking new. So I'm guessing that was about 5 years ago or so. And I'm in Central Park. It's a beautiful summer day, and everybody was staring at their phones all over the park. Everybody was staring at their phones. And that's just scary stuff. There's something about the design of the human mind and the human body that just depends on a few things that are missing in the world. And among those is companionship, friendships, um, exposure to sunlight, nature, um, yeah, positive interactions with folks, love, compassion, kindness, all those things. That there's a when those things are depleted and we start resonating at a lower vibrational level, this is what you get people that are angry all the time, anxious, depressed, sometimes suicidal, sometimes violent. These things happen, and it's because of um, the lack of those kinds of very positive stimulus. So, as an organization looking at public policy and dealing with politicians, the questions become a lot bigger. And it's not so much for us anymore about things like we used to talk all the time about work requirements for Medicaid. If you go back and look at, and now the Freedom Foundation webpage, Brian, since you're watching this, make a note, is a very valuable resource. It has 15 years of commentary and data and research reports on how government operates in Idaho. And what you find is that, back when we were talking about things like Medicaid and Medicaid expansion, going back to about 2010 after Obamacare passed, there were questions about work requirements for Medicaid, and especially as Medicaid expansion became a done deal, we were talking about um, work requirements. But every state that has gone to the federal government and asked for work requirements for Medicaid has either been shot down or had their work requirements watered down. And then we started just kind of talking about just the very nature of that, and it's something that's been promoted by so-called conservatives for years, namely in the course of the debt ceiling negotiations, where Kevin McCarthy came out and said, "Our red line in the sand is we got to have work requirements for welfare programs." And you're like, "Yeah, right. That's ever going to happen." But let's go back to the basics of what these things are. Medicaid is a socialist program. So why are conservatives defending a socialist program? even to say we're fixing it or modifying it with work requirements. It's either wrong or it's not wrong. And of course it's wrong. If I go to your house and I point a gun at you and I say, "Give me all your money," and you say, "Well, no, that's terrible. You're violating me." And everybody would agree that that's a crime, right? But if I go to your house and I say, "Give me all your money," I'm going to give it to the guy next door so he can buy health insurance or be able to get some kind of medical coverage, it would still be a crime, right? Interesting. When I say that to conservatives, they get that. They're like, "Yeah, there's no doubt that's a crime." Some of the liberals are like, "Well, I don't know. That I guess that could be kind of good." But it is a crime. It's wrong. You don't get to do that, and you especially don't get to go do that and say, "Give me all your money. I'm going to give it to that guy over there down the road so he can buy health insurance. But don't worry, he'll be out tomorrow morning to cut your lawn because we're requiring him to do some work before he spends this money that we stole." Of course, that's wrong. So we're looking at this stuff very differently because we think that we're kind of at a point where you're likely you're fourth or fifth century Rome, where it's the end of your era. You know, you're no longer going to be a, a superpower, a country of any kind of import, because you've destroyed your economy so much, you've destroyed the education system, and you've made people so dependent on government that it just isn't going to work anymore if we don't do something. And so the answers to the questions we think are bigger than what a lot of folks tend to talk about in the conservative movement, if you will. Instead of talking about um, you know, how do we fix the education system? And we still probably need to look at ways to fix the education system. We actually go out and we say government should not be in the education business. To the degree that we can fix schools, we'll try, but we need to let people know that there's a reason why government should not be in the education business because of what you have right now. And the medical welfare programs are destroying America and making people into brainless zombies because they're so dependent on the drugs that they get from government that they literally ask us. They'll send us emails all the time, almost every day now, that say, "Where am I going to get my meds if you guys get rid of Medicaid? I'm dependent. I'd not be able to live without the government. The government saved my life." That's that's truly what we see almost every day from people. It is crazy. So anyway, I've been rambling on for 22 minutes, basically stalling until the 6:30 actual event horizon start time. So forgive me for that, and I hope you've enjoyed at least some of my pondering, and you get an idea of what it is we've been talking about. But we do have at least a question that I wanted to hit. The question was, "Oh, there's a way I can." Oh yeah, I do this. Here you go. Technology. See, that's one of the questions that was asked. What are the top things we should look for in the next legislative session? Well, pardon me, I got to get a drink. My throat is just dry. It's terrible. I am so sorry. Forgive me for just a moment. Um, Oof. So, top things in the next legislative session. Number one, education choice has to be top of the list. I believe now the count is 8 states that passed some kind of, it's 7 or 8 states, I don't remember the exact number, that passed some kind of education choice legislation in their last legislative sessions. Oklahoma being the most recent one. Somebody's going to refresh my memory of what the other states were. I just don't remember off the top of my head now. Even Ohio, I think, just did something very recently. Ohio is not exactly a terribly red state, but they're passing education choice because they realize that their public schools are failing students, and so they're trying to offer people alternatives. So I think you should watch for that. We do have a problem with regard to education choice in that the Senate Education Committee, way, 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 way better than it has ever been before. The House Education Committee is complete trash. And so they are a bunch of leftist union hacks Republicans and Democrats, and they're just by and large just not interested. Not everybody, by the way, but most of the people on the committee. That's what they basically represent, the special interests of Education Inc., and they're just not going to allow for any education choice legislation to pass this legislative session or any other legislative session for that matter. That's just where they are, and it's a problem. But we're going to try. We do have a plan. We do have a plan. I don't want to share too much about the plan today, but I will tell you that we've come up with, I think, a strategy to deal with that situation. And so, yes, there will be an education choice bill in the next legislative session. I also think that there probably needs some, and by the way, my team and I are having a more detailed strategy meeting next month, where we're going to go through what can we really work on. So I'm not going to tell you that the following things are going to be considered in the next legislative session, only that I'm really interested in these items in one way or another, one form or another. And there goes the dogs barking at whatever, nothing, some ghosts or something. There's no one here. It's 6:30 and there's truly no one in the building. So I don't know what they're worked up about. But anyway, so I don't know if we're gonna make these things into a priority issue for us, or what I'm about to tell you are just things that I'm interested in seeing a discussion on. A lot of people are surprised to know this is just in no particular order. A lot of people are surprised to learn that in Idaho, the teachers unions have a collective bargaining right, which is to say that if a teachers union, if a labor union is functioning within a school district and they are there, they don't have to be recognized. They just have to exist. They must then be afforded the ability to bargain collectively with the school board, and that's really messed up. And it's not just messed up because we have some kind of a thing against teachers unions. We have a thing against public labor unions generally. Even FDR opposed public labor unions. He just did. He said that essentially that it's wrong for labor unions to occupy both sides of the bargaining table, because remember what happens is that the labor union gets somebody elected, a mayor, a legislator, governor, whoever, and then they're supposed to sit on the other side of the bargaining table. So they're on both sides of the bargaining table, and you see that happen in schools all the time, where the leftists get a majority of school board members elected. They might be union members themselves, and then they come in and say, "We want to collectively negotiate with you." And then, of course, they get basically everything they want because they're on both sides of the bargaining table. And it's become more of a problem now that the Idaho Education Association, I'm sorry, the National Education Association affiliate, the Idaho Education Association, is really representing that other side of the bargaining table. And the National Education Association is really, really, really left of center. Very, very, very left of center. They now have they had a race ideology toolkit that they released a couple months ago, basically giving teachers access to books and materials with regard to how to deal with race in in their classroom, and to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then about a month ago, they released a gender toolkit to deal with, your third grader who thinks she's a boy, kind of a thing, and to embrace her gender identity and expression. I mean, it's just super, super frustrating that that's what's going on. I mean, it's just absolutely. But anyway, we basically facilitate that with collective bargaining, state mandated collective bargaining in Idaho. It's crazy that people even think that's okay. Love to see something done with property taxes. The legislature did a little bit last legislative session, but not very much in my view. And I think that we need to start having a conversation about the appropriateness of telling people that they'll never really be able to own their home. They basically rent the home from the government. Even if you paid your mortgage, even if you're free and clear of any kind of bank debt, you never really own your home. You're just renting it from the government, property taxes. That's a concern. Um, let's see what else. The grocery tax. I think the governor promised that he would be supportive of repealing the grocery tax, and he's done nothing with that. And you've seen how people have been dealing with rampant inflation for the last several years. Several years? How long have we been dealing with inflation? This rampant inflation. We're really, yeah, last 2 or 3 years since the printing press that started with COVID. It's been a real problem, and everyone's experienced it. And the only real beneficiary, the only one who's smiling all the way to the bank, is government, because for all the inflated food prices, the government collects 6% off of that, and they love it, and they're content keeping it that way. I'd also like to see us take on Medicaid expansion. I think that's really important. We need listen. It was sold as being a cost-effective way of dealing with things, and it's not. It's more expensive than people have come to realize. And most importantly, again, as I mentioned before, you have all these people who are on psychotropic drugs unnecessarily, when really that what they really need to do is better exercise, diet, sunlight, relationships with humans, less smartphone, and more actual interaction with people. That's No one wants to talk about that because the medical industrial complex makes a lot of money by having people on prescription drugs. If you're just joining us, I apologize for getting in early. I, for some reason, thought I was supposed to be on at 6 o'clock, and I put in 6:30 in the notification box on this event. And so I apologize for that in advance, or I guess not really in advance since I've been going for half an hour. I apologize for that in hindsight. So if you're just joining, I haven't really answered very many questions except for kind of went over what the Freedom Foundation is doing, kind of a overview of the organization's view of uh, where we are in society 15 years after starting the organization, and what we're going to be looking at next legislative session. So those are the top of the mind things. I'd imagine that next legislative session we'll also talk about, um, again, medical freedom, because that's still a problem, because the whole COVID regime wasn't really fully cleared away from last year, and there is a real concern about um, people adding certain kinds of chemicals to our food, because you don't necessarily want to go get a jab, but if you can't help but have to eat, and the COVID mRNA stuff is in your food, then there's not much you can do about it, right? So there's a lot of talk about that. I think there's going to be some discussion. It would shock me if there's not, about AI, and how we need to be rethinking the education system as a result of that, because this is a new industrial revolution, if you will. All these districts that are going out and building schools, and the money that's going towards that, why? When you can basically use AI to create a language model that will, have kids learn very differently. It's kind of rudimentary now, but it sure has taken off quite a bit from where it was just in months. So anyway, there's that, and of course, we would expect, hopefully, legislators will be angry about what the universities are doing. The universities continue to do the social justice stuff, and the universities have ignored the legislature when it comes to their directives to knock it off. And now the University of Idaho said, "Hey, if you think we've ignored you before, just you wait. We're going to buy an entire university. We're going to buy University of Idaho. There's nothing you can do about it, because we're the University of Idaho. We can do whatever we want, and you guys are, you're just senators and representatives. You have no power over us." I'm hoping the legislature sets that crowd right, but who knows? I'm somewhat doubtful. So Jerry Gibbs asked on Twitter. Thanks, Brian, for I thought the Twitter comments were coming straight in here, but I guess not. But three of the five West Ada school district trustees that voted to approve the $500 million new taxes on the ballot. I feel this alone justifies their removal from office. Do you agree? Um, I with my Idaho Freedom Foundation hat on, I cannot, say whether a person should be removed from office or not removed from office. What I would tell you, and I don't know the sum total of the records, what I would tell you is that I thought that levy was so poorly constructed and extremely mean because what the West Ada School District did was they said, okay, now this may not be the sum total of the conversation, but I'm sure it was something a lot like this. Listen, guys, it's hard to pass a bond. We have to get 66 and two-thirds to pass a bond. And so if we go for a levy, we can get it passed with a simple majority. And wouldn't that be cool? And so they decided to go, for a levy because the threshold for passage was lower. But what they were really asking for was building products that were consistent with a bond. And so by asking for a levy instead of a bond, the time for repaying the note was compressed, significantly compressed. And that means the taxpayers would have had to pay more money, but it was just more convenient for the school district to ask for a levy, even though it was going to cost taxpayers a heck of a lot more every single month. And the trustees got spanked because of that. I think there are other things to be concerned about the West Ada School District, and maybe the one could be upset with the West Ada School District because despite all the complaints that we've raised about it, there was smut, pornography, filth in the West Ada School Library. That's we documented that. Go to IdahoFreedom.org and you'll see that we documented that there was, let's say, not very good content for kids in the kids' library at West Ada. What about the fact that every high school, I think every high school, I'll have to go look at leadmap.org and you can look at our data regarding the West Ada School District. I'm pretty sure that every high school in the West Ada School District has a gay sex alliance club on its campus. Is that something worth telling the trustees to take a hike? I mean, that's up to the voters to figure out. What about the fact that the academic performance of the West Ada School District is terrible? Absolutely terrible. Like a lot of school districts across the state, at maximum, about half the kids are able to read, write, and do math. But it's somewhere in most of the schools in the West Ada School District, it's about a third that graduate with the skills they need to be successful in life. Is that a reason why the trustees should be let go and replaced? Again, that's a decision for the voters of the district. That's not mine. We're just a public policy research organization, and I do think that those are discussions that ought to be had this election cycle, where you go up to school trustees and you say, why did you go for a levy when that was going to be the most expensive option? Why did you spend $30,000 on a PR campaign illegal in Idaho, by the way? And what are you going to do to make sure something like that doesn't happen again? Why do you allow for the gay sex alliance clubs to exist on campus? Why do you allow the pornography and smut to occur in the in our public school libraries? I mean, those are just a handful of questions that I would be asking. Why did you include a daycare center in the levy proposal of all things? You said that you needed the money for schools, but as we peel back the layers of the onion, you wanted to build a daycare exclusively for district employees, and then you wanted to offer the employees subsidized daycare at taxpayer expense. It's crazy. Um, this question. So listen, are there furries at West Ada School District? I don't know. I have heard that about school districts all over Idaho. I've heard it about schools over in Canyon County. I've heard about it about schools over in the Magic Valley. I've heard about it with schools in North Idaho, and of course, I've heard about it with regard to schools in um, in other parts of the country. I don't know. I simply don't know if that's going on or not. Uh, some of it sounds very reliable. I have been told that there are kids, whether or not they have cat litter boxes in their schools, um, that there are kids that have decided to identify as cats. And people who might respect have told me that they have seen this within their own families where the kids are going around, they're licking their hands, as though they're cats, licking their paws and stuff like that. And what the hell's going on with the adults? Why aren't the adults, slapping these kids and saying, "Stop that"? I mean, what's wrong with you're not a cat. You can't use the cat box, and you're not Superman. You can't jump off of buildings. You're not Wonder Woman. You don't own an invisible jet or whatever. But for some reason, a lot of adults who are seemingly intelligent people have allowed these kids to let their fantasies manifest in very public ways. And, and of course, the worst of that is having surgeries performed on them in which the medical industrial complex says, come on, we'll give you some pills to stop puberty. We'll cut off parts. We'll add parts. We'll do all kinds of things. And these are adults that are allowing this kind of thing to happen. It's really very, very shameful. And history, I think, will look back extremely poorly on the folks who have allowed this sort of thing to go on. So, but no, in answer to your question, I don't know if furries are really happening. I think that in the schools anyway, it's certainly happening in society. You see that all the time on social media. I mean, if you look at TikTok, there's a whole. By the way, I don't recommend that you go on TikTok and experience this sort of thing for yourself. But if you do go on TikTok, you would see people who have identified as what was the one I saw yesterday? It was on our IFF group chat. People who identify as winged creatures or something. They think they have wings. I don't know. And one of them was saying, I identify as somebody with wings, and this person wanted to know if other people who identify as having wings ever got that feeling of when there's water going across your wings. Can I guess I don't even know how to describe this stuff. This is mental illness on display, and there aren't enough drugs, you know, pharmaceuticals in the world to do anything about that. It's just a fact of life that these people need help beyond just having their fantasies validated. But these things are occurring in our in society, and I would imagine since it's happening in society, it's probably manifesting in public schools. And I bet you there are public school administrators, whether they're in Idaho or not, who are validating and facilitating it within the public school system in Idaho. By the way, because we saw that, you know, people who say, "Oh no, it doesn't happen here." Um, we have a report. It's a 50-page report on critical social justice in the Idaho public school system, and all the media panned that. They're like, "Oh, all these things the Freedom Foundation says is happening is not really happening," and then we show them that it's happening, and they just ignore it. And then, of course, what happened, just a month or so ago, when a kid from Kellogg, Idaho, couldn't walk in his graduation because he said guys are guys and girls are girls, and we're supposed to believe that the left isn't controlling and operating our public schools in some kind of way. That's just crazy. Anyway, so any other questions anybody has want to pose to me? So I've been going on for about 45 minutes, and I'd love to keep going. It's my bad for getting on early. I apologize to those of you. ALA in our libraries like Montana. Oh yeah, yes, there are. We did check. There are individual libraries in Idaho that are American Library Association members, and I didn't make a list of all of them, but I just did just a quick search of whether they're and there are little libraries too that are American Library Association members. But what I'd also tell you is that the media are lying when they tell you that they re-report what the government wants you to believe, which is that the Idaho Commission for Libraries is not tied in with the American Library Association. Go to the transparent.idaho.gov website and look up American Library Association, and you'll see that the Commission for Libraries spent a nominal amount of money of $4,000 or $5,000 with the American Library Association in the last fiscal year. Now, the Libraries Commission says that it isn't involved in the American Library Association. They're not members. But what the complaint was is that the commission is tied to the uh, American Library Association. That's not about just membership. There are other ways you can be tied to the Library Association besides just membership. For example, the Library Code of Ethics on the Commission for Libraries webpage is from the American Library Association. There are other references to the American Library Association throughout the Commission for Libraries website. It even goes so far as to say that in order to be the state librarian, you have to have attended by law a American Library Association certified higher education program, which is not what the statute says. The statute actually says that you have to attend a certified um, uh, a library, special library certified school, not necessarily doesn't say anything about the American Library Association. It just says you have to attend a specially certified school by a library certification organization, and there are a couple of them in the country, of which the American Library Association just happens to be one. So anyway, yes, it is a problem in Idaho. It's still a problem. The Commission for Libraries is terrible. It's been terrible for a long time. It's unfortunate that the state of Idaho doesn't do more to try to stop some of this stuff. We just kind of pretend, the state officials, they just kind of pretend that it's not happening and just hope that you won't ask ever about it. The state and local officials are just content to talk about other things. They want you to ask about federal land management and water issues, and they want you to complain about how terrible California is, but never question whether Idaho is super bad. By the way, before I go, um, we're going to release a report pretty soon on the Florida education system, the K through 12 education system. Basically, what our Center for American Education did, Center for American Education did a report um, looking into critical social justice in the K through 12 system in Florida. And you can take that report and compare it to the report that we're going to release with regard to California in the next several weeks. And then we're going to take those two reports and compare it to what we see in Idaho. The question I would ask of you is Idaho's public education system regarding K through 12 social justice programs more akin to what's happening in Florida or more alike what's happening in California? That's a really important question because for every person that I talk to, almost 90% of the time somebody says, I don't want Idaho to be like California. But if your education system looks more like California than Florida, it's just a matter of time before your state becomes California. There are no magic beans that stop Idaho from becoming California. And and we're doing all the same things that California is doing. We do, yes, we do diversity, equity, and inclusion. We do critical race theory, do critical queer theory. We do all the things that California has been doing. We're not doing the things that Florida has been doing to ban the leftist stuff. Florida has been more proactive than most states, and Idaho has been proactive only in a in a window dressing way so that folks can go back to their constituents and say, yeah, I took on that issue so that it doesn't happen here. But it is happening here. And that's because legislators refuse to act because they want the money and the support from the leftist teachers union and from other lefty organizations. So anyway, I think that's about it for me for tonight. I think then we'll do this again, and I'll give more lead time, and I'll also try to come in at the right time instead of half an hour early. But see, that's why you have to pay attention not only to what I'm doing, but what politicians are doing, because they tend to surprise you when you least expect it. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether you're tuning in live or you're going to be watching the recording of this. You're always free. Feel free to email me if you like with any questions that you have. It's very simple. It's Wayne at idahofreedom.org. And I'm very happy to answer your questions. But I'll come back on here. We'll do this again. And hopefully we'll get more people on here. It'll be a bit more interactive. But look forward to talking to you again next time. Thanks so much. Bye bye.